He's not going to back off. And he makes it up as he goes along, as any good investigator does. I remember many years ago, I was trying to pop a post office box in the peninsula, and the post office people won't tell you the address of somebody who has a post office box. I was trying to get the guy's car, so I had to get the address. All I had was a P.O. box number. So I drove down from San Francisco and stopped along the freeway where you could hear the trucks going by, used the payphone and called the post office and said, I'm out here at the freeway. I've got 4,000 chickens from Petaluma, and I have to deliver them to Mr. Jones. Where do you want them? I'll bring them down there, we'll put them on your loading dock. And the PO guy says, oh, just a minute, I think we have an address on this guy. And so that's what private eyes do, and that's what Spade is the master of, that kind of game.
That's great. Speaking of Spade, some have said, at least this is what I've read, that Spade was intended to be Hammett's projection of himself. And I even read that somebody felt that the physical description of Spade, the bees and the Satan, the blonde Satan, was supposed to be at least Hammett's face. Where do you think Spade comes from, and do you think that Hammett was really modeling after himself?
Certainly that physically. Hammett used himself several times. The thin man is Hammett, physically. You know, it's absolutely right down the line. In The Dane Curse, Owen, the bad guy in that, is modeled on Hammett physically. Again, the sorrel hair before he turned white hair. And it was his daughter, Jo, Hammett's only surviving child, Jo Hammett, Jo Marshall, who first said to me, look at this picture and read the description. And it's the one of the pictures of Hammett where he's in profile, and you see, and it is pretty much. I think Spade is a huskier guy than Hammett was. Hammett was very, very skinny and tubercular and all of that. So emphysemic and a boozer. And so, but physically, yes. Where did Spade come from? Spade, I think, came, well, obviously, he came from Hammett's own experiences as a private detective over about a 5-year period off and on, or an 8-year period, depending on how you measure it. And he wrote a letter to his editor at Knopf, and he said, sometime somebody's going to take this form, the tough private eye guy. Somebody's going to take that and turn it into literature. And I'm just egotistical enough to think I might be able to do it. And if I'm going to do it, it's going to be this book, Maltese's Falcon. So he was shooting for the moon when he wrote it. He, I won't say idealized, he perfectioned the persona of the private detective and then made Spade that guy. So I think that's where Spade, nobody knows for sure, but I think that's where Spade came from.
Now I reread the book for probably the 15th time or something like that, and then I can't keep up. Then I read some biographies and some critical discussion of the book, and some things came up, one of which I'm just going to ask you about, but I hadn't even occurred to me, about the relationships between the people in the book. We all know that Spade's having an affair with Miles Archer's wife.
Yes.
Of course, he has a relationship with Bridget, but it's also been suggested that he slept with Effie.
No.
What do you think the nature of their relationship is?
It's the hero worship. And she's crazy about him, but she knows that he would be destructive for her if she ever really. She's just a kid, you know. When he first hires her, she's a kid. Why not?
Some special insight into this.
You're not special, but just my idea. Anyway, but I don't think that he had an affair with her. He was her hero, flawed hero. She was his safety valve. He'll put his head against her hip and rub it irritatedly against her hip. He knows that here, at least, is someone who can merit his complete trust. And she might not always do the things that he wants her to do. He gets irritated with her, all of that stuff. But he knows that here is safe haven. Here's the one person in this rotten world that we live in, from his viewpoint, that is not rotten, that he can trust. That's how I see the relationship.
Well, we'll talk about Spade more in a little bit, but let's talk about Guttman. I personally think Guttman is one of the great villains of fiction. Would you agree with that? And if you do, what do you think makes him so fascinating a character?
Well, he's a 19th century man in the 20th century, for one thing. Guttman is almost a Edwardian character. I don't know as he is a great villain. He's a tremendous character. I once said to myself, is he such a great villain? Because he wants to get the Maltese Falcon. He's 19 years, he's looked for this little item. And he accepts a worthless lead substitute from Kemidov. And then he got shot dead. So, I mean, is he such a great villain? He is a great villain, but he doesn't have a core that keeps him the way Spade has a core inside himself here. Guttman is all about the acquisition of this thing. He is so in love with the history, with the idea of a gold, jewel-encrusted bird, that he can see nothing else in life but that. And he will have no loyalties except to that. He will betray anybody to get that. And so in those terms, he is a great villain. And he's the wonderfulest villain. And of course, Sidney Greenstreet, I mean, my God, you know. When he realizes, first when he realizes that Wilmer has disappeared, and his face, look on his face. And then when he starts cutting the lead off the Falcon and realizes it's a phony. It's just like a pig grunting, you see. And of course, all his bulbs are jonesing. So yeah, he is tremendous. I mean, you gotta love the guy. You know, you see Fog in San Francisco, and you see him scuttling down an alley with this thing under his arm.
Now, here's a question for you in the audience to think about before Joe answers it. But when you saw the word gunsel in the book, what did you think of that? And what does it mean?
Anybody? Gunsel started out as the term gunsel means a boy kept for pederastic purposes. But Hammett uses it as a gunman. He's a gunsel. He's a guy who has a gun. In the years following the Maltese Falcon, that went into the underworld argot. So after that, a gunsel has always meant a gunman, not a boy kept for pederastic purposes. So he changed the language there by when he called him a gunsel. There's another thing in there when he says to the kid that sits down by him in a Wilmer Cook in a hotel lobby and says, "Are you still on the Gooseberry Lake?" And he had heck of a fight with his publisher to keep